What's going on, YouTube? Thanks for tuning back into another video. I hope you guys are having a magnificent day. Today is Tuesday. We still have a couple days left before we head out to Cleetus and Cars. I'm going to reiterate it, 23rd of November, Bradenton Motorsports. We're going to be at Cleetus and Cars. This isn't preparation for that event, since that event we are going to be NA, but there are some modifications that we want to do to the actual turbo components before we get ready for next week's turbo install once we get back from that event. So if you just notice right there, obviously I was destroying a perfectly good exhaust turbo manifold, not intake. And the reason I did this is because this, even though it's a budget manifold, it's not made EF or CRX specific. If you know, you know, CRXs and EFs have very small, tight engine bays. And if you were to do this manifold on a EG, a DC, an EK or something, your radiator core support sits a lot more forward, so no matter how you clock the turbo, you won't really have clearance issues. That being said, on the last video, you guys saw me actually clock the turbo so I would have the exhaust coming out on the transmission side, but after doing a little bit of R&D, if you will, on my end, I decided not to do that just because it's going to be way too close to the radiator, and the radiator angle is going to be awful on that. I did get my 3-inch 90-degree, which is going to be the up pipe. I'm going to add some piping to this after, as well as the 3-inch 4-bolt flange that goes directly to the turbo. As for the manifold, the reason I cut this off is because the way that this sits onto the manifold, the T3 flange, it's almost clocked maybe like 10-15 degrees in a certain direction that won't let me use the cold side compressor on the transmission side, because if I do that, then the turbo itself is going to run into the block. And I know in the past, like especially in the early 2000s, when turbo kits were still coming out with not a lot of research and development and whatnot, and they were kind of like universal, just bolt onto the head with that pattern and run whatever turbo you have, a lot of people would have to notch the block, which I have a couple blocks I can show you on right now, but basically you can get the idea. The webbing on the block, which is basically the support, you know what, I'll just show you right now. A lot of people would have to notch out this whole area, if it'll focus, this whole area. Some would have to notch out that, basically shave the block to be nice and flat, just so they could fit the turbo. Now, once we get done re-putting the flange on, I might still have to notch it a little bit, but the way that the flange sat before, it would have just been way too aggressive and way too much to even clock it at all. So that being said, you do get the idea. I am going to run the cold side of the turbo, this one right here, this side right here. That's going to sit on the transmission side, and I'll have the exhaust coming out the driver side or the engine side. So that's basically going to be sitting a little transverse of how it normally goes. I like to run the exhaust typically on the transmission side like I had on the Integra. That goes out right out the passenger, so you don't have the fumes directed towards you at the driver's seat. It's kind of like a trade-off if you do it this way, but I think it'll work out fine. You guys saw me just use a cutoff wheel to get the majority of it, and then for the inside, I actually used the Dremel. And I had a couple different bits, but I switched over to this diamond one that I got at Harbor Freight, which it cut a lot better at the end. So obviously, it's kind of a nasty cut. Let me see if you can see. There's a lot of meat on there still, as well as on the manifold side. I'm going to try to flatten this out as much as I can. That way we can clock the flange exactly how we want it, test fit it on the car, use a little jack underneath to actually put the turbo where I want it. And then after that, I can actually tack weld it on with my little Harbor Freight MIG welder. And then we'll get it welded after that. So that's not an issue. I just really wanted to show you guys the modification aspect of it. We want to be able to install this turbo kit basically in like 2 hours, you know? It might take a little bit more depending if I have to go buy some oil lines or something, but my big philosophy when it comes to this kind of thing, especially when it's a car that you don't drive every day, you want to have all the parts ready to go. As soon as that you start working on it, you can dive right in and finish it within one day. So you saw I ordered an oil line one day, I ordered the piping another day, then I ordered the exhaust stuff that I already got here. That way we're ready for when the time comes. I don't have the car sitting outside without being able to drive. Obviously, I keep a tarp on it just because it's Florida and the weather's awful. But the header is on. It's NA. I drove it the other day, like 2 days ago. And I can still enjoy it. There's no downtime when you're modifying stuff like this if you have the time to accumulate all the parts. Now, if you're the type of person who likes adding one part, let it sit, then add another part, let it sit, more power to you. That's just not my preference, you know? That being said, I'm going to clean up the flange right now, make it flat as much as I can, and clean up the turbo manifold as well. And we'll get from there. We'll start taking off the header, and we can actually start test fitting this and seeing how it's going to clear with the turbo clock the other way. It's not perfect, but obviously this is not the side that meets the turbo. This is just the side that needs to get welded. The side that meets the turbo is over here, and before I actually bolt everything up, I think I'm just gonna use like a block sander and make sure that this is nice and flat. But, so this is going to basically sit right here. Prior to me cutting it, off the top of my head, I wanna say the angle was like this, and you can see that it pivots down right. That's how I believe it was, because that would make the compressor move a certain way, or it might be opposite right now, who knows. I'm not very good at memory stuff, but if it were like this, then I'm gonna twist it like this. Basically, you can see the change in the angle that I'm gonna do is gonna be very small. Obviously I'm gonna do it once it's bolted onto the car, but it's gonna be enough to actually make the clearance work and get it exactly how I want. So like I said, I'm about to take the header off. I'm gonna pull the radiator forward a little because I need to do that to actually bolt the ram horn on, just because how the runners sit and the stud comes out, so I can't pull it. I have to pull the radiator off. But yeah, I'm gonna do that right now, get it into place. I'm gonna try to have the jack underneath, probably with a 2x4 holding the turbo upwards. That way it's in position, already bolted onto the flange. That way I just move the flange exactly how I want, and then just give it a tack weld or two and make sure everything clears, and we should be pretty good. All right, so I did end up mocking it up like I said I was gonna do. I put this on the other side. It is way off because the manifold, it just curves inwards. It doesn't come straight down after being bolted to the head. It literally curves inwards, and you can see that angle at that shot right there. So, new idea. I am going to try to mock it up here. I have very ghetto stand, just like these little pirouettes or whatever you want to call them. That as a can, and then the jack underneath. Obviously the car is on jack stands, and I'm going to try to rotate it enough so that the exhaust will be able to kind of clear going behind the radiator and straight up, kind of like the original idea of the actual transmission side exhaust, which is kind of what we wanted from the beginning. So just needed a little bit more angle, and that'll still be nice because then the cold side will just continue over there and not have to do some crazy loop under the exhaust. But that being said, the radiator will need to be moved eventually. It's going to have to be tilted or anything just to actually clear it. That's not as aggressive as I want the turn. The turn I want it a little bit more. That way that the exhaust that I'm going to make is going to be very, you know, it's going to be tight, but it'll work still. So let me get my MIG welder out real quick. Well, it's technically still a flux core since there's no gas. But let me get this out real quick and I'll do some spot welds and see if we can get that to work out. All right, so we have the flux core welder out here. I took the actual turbo off of the hot side just because the housing itself is going to be much easier to move. And I'm going to try to clock it as best as I can and then do a couple tack welds. And if that works out, then we'll go from there. But yeah, I'm just going to mock it up real quick and give it some welds. All right, so I just got it tacked on two places over here on the left, just loosely on the front. And then over here, obviously, you know, I had to include a couple popcorns because I'm gonna watch a movie later, so gotta have some popcorn early in the day. And as for the radiator, I ended up moving it how I said I didn't really want to, but it's not gonna be an issue. I can still clear the 2.5 inch intake, or excuse me, the 2.5 inch cold side intercooler piping, which I'll test fit in a little bit. And then for the actual up pipe, here's my 90-degree 3-inch exhaust that I had bought online. And obviously you can see it is a tight fit right there, but how I'm going to do it is I'll get the flange over here, and let's say that this is the up pipe right here. I'm going to cut the exhaust at an angle so the flange is kind of tilted. That way, instead of it being straight up like this, it'll have some angle inwards, and it'll be able to clear the radiator fan, clear the slave. Obviously it's going to be right above it, and it'll just continue up right here. It will be kind of a tight fit, but I'm trying to learn how to do all this stuff, so I think it'll be a good learning experience also. And then I'll be able to play with the radiator a little bit and clock it exactly how I want. And yeah, I'm gonna unbolt the manifold right now, probably get a few more tacks on it, and then test fit everything, and should be good to go. All right, so we ended up putting it in the press just because there was a little gap that we wanted to fill, and it wasn't enough just banging it with a hammer. And when we did, it would just shock the little tacks that we had, and it would break the tack. So we have it in the press right now. Basically, like some people have a big vise that they use to do this kind of thing with, and obviously we don't have something that big, so it took out most of the gap. There's still like a hairline, maybe like 1/8 of an inch, but if we're gonna end up making it, that shouldn't be a problem. And if you know, if it gets TIG, that can be filled in too. So we're going to try it out right now. Currently it has 2 tacks on the inside. I'm gonna do 1 on the outside here, 1 on the outside on the other side, and then we'll retest it on the car, because this is the flange. We cut it off again and we redid it. But we think that this should be pretty good. So we'll go ahead and give this a go. I got it on there too. All right, see it. Looks pretty decent. We have the 2 tacks in here, like I said. 1, 2 from previous, and then 1, 2, and 3 out here. There's still a little bit of gap right there, like we mentioned, but the main gap that we were concerned of was the big one right here in the front. So let's go test fit this on the car. You can see the angle changed a lot from where we originally got the manifold like. All right, so we have it clocked. This obviously has a lot more clearance than it did before. This used to be parallel with the radiator and it sat like right next to it. Now it actually has some angle inwards. So with those tacks that we have right now, 2 on the inside and 2 on the outside, 3 on the outside, excuse me, that should be good to hold it just for the time being. Obviously it's just loosely bolted. But I think I'm gonna tighten it down real quick, put the turbo on again, and I might even put the intercooler piping and whatnot just to see how it'll sit. But yeah, I might do like 1 or 2 more tacks just so it's a little bit stronger, and should be ready to get welded. All right, everybody, skip forward a couple hours. Actually, it hasn't even been a couple hours. It's about an hour later. The manifold was all tacked up, and I took it across the street to my boy's shop, and he just MIG welded it for me. So this is all good, said and done. Nothing fancy, but it's all welded on the outside and on the inside. I'm just gonna end up porting this a little bit, nothing too aggressive, just so I can get it nice and like transitionally flowing into the actual back housing like it needs to. As for the intercooler, I ended up mocking everything up again with the piping and whatnot. Now I have the couplers that I didn't have in the last video, so I'm able to do so. I told you that I was going to order a large coupler to make up for the slack on the hot side of the intercooler piping. And this is basically it. I believe it's 10 inches on each side, so you can kind of cut to size on exactly what you need. As for this right here, I just made like a little L bracket out of square tubing, just nice and clean and functional. This is going to support it very well. That's just one side, and obviously I'm going to make another one for this. It's going to be a little bit longer since I have the back door right there, but definitely going to make it work. And as for the radiator, I was looking at a few different options. If I want to still keep the OEM hood latch and the cross thing over here, it's going to be kind of hard because of the way that I want the radiator to sit and whatnot. And once I put the manifold, I'll show you a little bit closer how it's going to look. But I was thinking I could just use like the spots right here to make a hood latch. And if you look online, you can get like a little push pin hood latches, which is kind of what I want to do on this. I used to have them on my Integra. They were pretty good. You just have to remember to push down and make sure they click always. So gotta be really careful with those. But I think I'm gonna end up ordering those in the future. And yeah, she's looking a lot like more together than it did last time. Let me just throw the manifold on real quick, and then we can look a little bit more at the exhaust routing for this. Even with the one bracket, it's already holding up the intercooler. Obviously, I'm not gonna keep it like that, but I got the jack out of the way, and I put the turbo on. It's semi-clocked, has just 2 bolts loosely holding it on. I think I'm gonna have it like that. That way I can use that coupler to connect right there. And the radiator will be pulled back a little bit, and that should be perfect to clear up the up pipe right there. It'll be tight, but it's doable. So I'm going to cut this right now at an angle. I'm going to take about 3 inches off right there. See if I can cut it kind of going like that. Okay, imagine it. It's a little hard with one hand right now to describe, but I'm going to cut it like this. That way it can have the angle going backwards and kind of clear the radiator a little bit better. So yeah, let's try it out. Okay, so now that I have everything loosely placed on there, I went ahead and cut the up pipe, or the 90-degree angle that I got. So I don't have a bandsaw, so the cut is nowhere near perfect. Luckily, the pipe actually fits into the groove of the flange for the turbo itself, so I'll be able to play with it and it won't be that big of a deal. Since I cut it at that angle, so I could angle it backwards right there instead of having it straight out. And although I did save a lot of clearance by rotating the flange on the turbo and moving out the radiator, it's still kind of going to be a tight fit. You can see right there, that's about the clearance that I'm going to have. So that being said, it's going to go up about right there, and then I'll actually be able to add another pipe and make it go straight up out the hood. But I'm about to tack it in place and take it off and see if I can weld it all around. Probably if it penetrates decent with the flux core, I might just end up doing it like that all the way. But I cleaned up the edges right here a little bit with, you know, grinder. Trying to make it a little bit cleaner, but we'll see how it works out, you know? All right, guys, I hate to do what I'm doing right now, which is kind of cut the video in half. I had to throw everything in the garage, which is right now, everything's kind of loosely put everything in the garage. I just repeated myself a couple times. But a buddy of mine told me that he's going to Jacksonville right now for a meeting for something that he wants to pursue in the future. So he asked if I could go out with him. So screw the cars. I'm going to go up to Jacksonville with him right now, support him in any way possible. Tomorrow, I will record another video. I really want to get this video out to you tonight so you guys can see progression of the build. Like I said, this isn't going to be turbo for Cletus and Cars. This is just the test fit and everything. We are going to be NA/nitrous for Cletus and Cars. Thank you for watching, guys. Let me know if you have any questions that you want me to cover in the video tomorrow. Let me know in the comment section below or shoot me an Instagram DM at Slowintegra, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace.